Hi, welcome back to another episode of Coldstream Rod Shop. I'm Derek Fraser. Welcome to this week's episode on installing the rear end in the 40 Plymouth chassis. On the last episode, I ended it by talking about how I stripped some of the brackets off the rear differential here. I carried on and I cleaned the rest of them off. There were a few stuck nuts on this, but I eventually got them out. I basically used the propane torch and paraffin wax technique, which I've talked about in a couple of, well, some of the early episodes anyways. Essentially heat the bracket up with the propane torch. Doesn't even have to be cherry red. Put some paraffin wax onto it, and then so far it's worked every single time for me. Don't want to jinx it, but it's very effective, I find, getting out stubborn nuts and bolts. So right now, like I said, this is all cleaned up. I've dressed everything off. I've wire wheeled it. Might have a couple little places left to touch up, but essentially it's ready to now move into the chassis over there. And then, like as I said at the end of the last episode, the Welder Series triangulated 4-link came in, the kit to install it. The only thing I'm waiting for right now is the coilover shocks, which should be here by the end of this week. And then I sourced out a rear cross member, or something I'll make a rear cross member from, which again is, as I mentioned before, it's 1.5 by 3-inch rectangular tubing. I'll drill holes into it and I'll put like a bung or a tube in there for the upper shock bolts to go through. So those there are my trial tires, just tires that I picked up from the junkyard. They're not the ones that the owner is going to put on, but they're 235 75 R15 tires. I think we're going to be using 225, so these are just a little bit taller, but that's okay for the mock-up purposes. So like I said, going to move that underneath here, set my wheelbase up, and then start trying to locate the upper and lower of the triangulated 4-links. So I've got the rear end positioned in back. It's centered from side to side. I do have the one wheel. It's sitting about 1/2 inch off the floor, so it's not 100% ride height, but it's close. It's close enough. What I'm doing now is figuring out where the lower 4-link brackets go. So on a 32 Ford is pretty easy and straightforward because I did it 3 times. I knew exactly where it went, and you kind of know how wide they're going to be. But in this case here, we got to figure out where it's going to attach the forward section and also where it's going to attach on the rear of the axle. So like I said, the axle is basically at ride height. I've got the pinion adjusted up, I think about 3 degrees. I've got to double check that. I think that's where we need to be, just to get it close. So then, essentially, I put the lower 4-link together, and I've got to figure out where that is going to fit on the frame. What I've discovered is it's going to fit just forward of where the original rear leaf spring mount was, so I'm going to have to take that off. Then I'm also going to have to box the inner side of the frame here so that these brackets from Welder Series I could then weld it on. Like I said, on the 32 Ford, what I did before, I actually cut, I don't know if the camera lady, here I'll show you. On the 32 Fords, basically what I did is here's the rear support. I cut the wings off, and then this bracket was pretty simple. I welded it to the bottom of where my X member was and the frame was. It was pretty easy to do. So that's what I've got to do to get it on, but there's a catch. The catch is that there's supports on the side here for the running boards. If I box it, I won't be able to access the nuts where they go in. So what I'm going to have to do is make some plates with threads into them. And what I'll do is I'll weld those where these holes are so that I could then take these pieces off. And then when the car gets reassembled, we'll be able to actually just thread those straight into the frame. So first up, cut these brackets off. Second is going to be put some threaded inserts onto the frame here. Then I can box it on both sides and then we can put the lower control arm on. Here we are. I was making some threaded inserts up to attach the running board brackets. I probably could have gone online and ordered some inserts or drove 45 minutes into Halifax, our biggest major city, and bought some, but I just decided to make my own. Essentially it's a 1/4 inch plate bar, and all we did was just drill and tap it. It's 5/16 18. Now probably wherever you're from, whether it's in the US or Australia, New Zealand, or even in Canada, one thing you probably find, like I do, is when you go to Canadian Tire, Princess Auto, wherever, and you buy the bargain kit of drills, they just don't simply hold up. I basically resort to using some drill bits I got when I was 18, and a set of drill bits I got at a flea market, and I can resharpen those over and over and over again and drill all kinds of holes, and those are probably just good for drilling plastic or wood. Same thing with the taps. I use this tap set, which is great for chasing threads, but when you've got to do multiple holes, you got to basically cough up and, go buy, a real high-speed steel tap, which will probably last a very, well, I've got some there. I've probably tapped 100 and some holes with it, and they still keep on tapping. So one of those things, I guess, is my plug on. You get what you pay for. And when you pay up for it, typically you can keep on using it for a long time. So I made up 8 of these. I'll show you where they are over here on the car, or on the frame, that is. Camera lady will have to follow me over here. So the running board brackets, as I said, before I put the boxing plates onto it, I needed to put some threaded inserts here. So I've done that top and bottom here. Just cranked the welder up and welded those in place here and here on 4 places all the way around. So that's done. This is just an extra in case I screwed something up. And what I've started doing now is I've made up the first set of boxing plates out of 1-inch plate steel. That's ready to weld in there, and I've got the other one done for the other side. But what I got to do now, I'm going to wire wheel the inside of this. I think ultimately this frame is going to get sandblasted at some point, but I want to kind of neutralize whatever is going on in here. So I'm going to wire wheel this on the inside, then I'm going to go out and get a rust encapsulator paint, more than likely POR 15. That's the one that's here. It's pretty pricey, but really does the trick. And I'll brush the whole inside of this before I put this plate on. So I'm going to carry on with that. Once the plates are in place, then hopefully we can get to putting the lower forelink on. Here we are. I've got quite a bit done. I didn't get done as much as what I hoped for finishing this video off. What I've done so far is, like I was saying previously, I wanted to put like a rust encapsulation paint or something on the inside of these frame rails before I started welding the boxing plates on. What I chose to use was POR 15. It's POR stands for paint over rust. This stuff is about $90 a can here in Canada. I'm not sure what it is in the US. There's a bunch of stuff you can use. I think Eastwood sells it. But essentially I just wanted to neutralize the rust on the inside before I put the plate over it, because I really don't have the opportunity to sandblast it and paint it like at this stage. So like I said, that's done. I put the boxing plate on the back on both sides, and then what I started doing was putting on the lower 2 bars of the forelink. As I said, one critical thing is to set up the pinion angle at approximately 3 degrees, or as close as you can get it, and then to center your axle directly over where it needs to be relative to the front. So on this particular car, the wheelbase is 117 inches. So what I did is I used a drywall square, right like this. I set this up. I measured 117 inches from the center of the front wheels back to here. And then because my tube is 3 inches thick, I drew another line 1.5 inches back, and then I was able to put my drywall square right up against that line and then move my axle back to it. So I did that on both sides. So 3 degrees, got your wheelbase set up. And then what I was doing, I positioned the rear bracket on the axle so that it was more or less perfectly straight up and down. It took 2 of us to do it, to hold this and then put this bracket here, put a mark for this bracket. I tacked the front brackets in place and then brought this bracket back up to here and adjusted the bottom bar until the shock bracket was perfectly level. So the pinion is 3 degrees, but the brackets are actually at, I guess if you want to call it, 90 to the floor. So the shocks are going to go on here. I wanted these brackets basically perpendicular with the floor, but my pinion angle is still at 3 degrees. So I've done that on both sides. The axle is centered. The other thing too, I wanted to make sure that the distance between the 2 brackets here where it connects to the frame is the same as where it reaches on the axle itself. So I made that measurement. I put little marks onto it. You can actually see the little marker lines there right now onto it. So in addition to the bracket being perpendicular to the floor, and also they're equal distance apart. So the bottom bars are actually parallel to each other. The rear axle is not fully welded up yet. I'm going to basically weld the axle, everything fully welded once I get the top brackets on. So in the next episode, what the plan is to unfortunately do part 2, just because time ran out this week. But what we'll be doing is we'll be putting the triangulated part of the bracket right there. So the brackets that come with it are set up for my welder series as if you're going to go up against a frame that doesn't have an X member. So they allow we have to cut this off so that it connects up with here. So on the next episode, I'll go through putting these on. And then the other thing that showed up, we have our coilover shocks. The coilover shocks showed up. So next episode, I will put the top 4 links in. I'll put the cross member across the top and we'll put the shocks in. So that's it for this week. Sorry it's in 2 episodes, but that's what it takes to do things sometime. Please like, share, tag, and subscribe. And of course, send me your comments. Everybody take care and have a great week.